Hello, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. My name is Troy Miles, and I am here to present to you my reflection of the book that I chose, Finding Meaning, The Sixth Sense of Grief by David Kessler. Thank you for watching. I really enjoyed reading this book. It taught me a lot regarding trauma, grief, and loss, but it was the book Finding Meaning. The Sixth Stage of Grief by David Kessler introduces a crucial sixth stage of grief beyond the traditional five developed by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, arguing that finding meaning allows individuals to transform pain into a more peaceful, hopeful experience. It offers actionable tools, insights, and personal stories to help readers navigate loss, honor their loved ones, and move forward. Books benefits. There are several benefits to one reading this book. First of all, it provides help after loss. Then, it helps readers understand grief. Then it introduces meaning as part of healing. It also encourages a personalized journey. It offers practical coping tools and it reduces suffering. The greatest benefit of this book that I was able to see is that it helps people move from asking, why did this happen, to how can I live meaningfully now? Kessler had a few areas that he focused on within this book whenever it relates to trauma, grief, and loss, and those are suicide, child loss, difficult relationships, and mental illness and addiction. Whenever it comes to suicide, this book explores the unique grief that follows suicide, including guilt, unanswered questions, shame, anger, and the search for understanding after a sudden and painful loss. When it comes to child loss, Kessler speaks deeply about the devastating pain of losing a child, drawing from his own experience. He offers compassion, validation, and guidance for surviving unimaginable grief while finding ways to honor the child's memory. Whenever it comes to difficult relationships, this book addresses grief connected to complicated or unresolved relationships, such as estrangement, abuse, conflict, or the death of someone with whom healing never occurred. And finally, with mental illness and addiction, Kessler recognizes the emotional burden families often carry when a loved one struggles with mental illness and addiction, as it impacts both the individual and family system, including grief over who the person once was, repeated cycles of hope and disappointment, and loss related to mental health symptoms, overdose, or relational damage. Whenever it comes to the counseling theory that can be derived after reading this book, I'll have to say that Kessler was very unique. He does not use a specific counseling theory in this book. However, he is such an expert at using integrative grief counseling as his approach throughout his work. His therapeutic style, he uses many modalities of counseling throughout this book. A few of these are, first of all, existential or meaning-centered. Next, he also uses grief counseling or bereavement therapy. Third, he also uses narrative therapy elements. And then finally, he also uses cognitive reframing elements. Just so many different modalities that he uses throughout this book. He is very authentic. Kessler's counseling style in this book is best understood as an integrative, meaning-centered grief approach rooted primarily in existential therapy while incorporating humanistic, narrative, and bereavement counseling principles. Kessler talks about 3 different ways that we can use and go about transforming grief into meaning. And those 3 ways are going to be memory, legacy, and personal growth. Whenever it comes to memory, Kessler encourages people to actively engage with memories rather than avoid them. Telling stories, revisiting meaningful moments, journaling, or creating rituals. With legacy, Kessler emphasizes honoring the impact a loved one had by carrying forward something that they valued, such as kindness, advocacy, creativity, or beliefs. Now, finally, whenever it comes to personal growth, Kessler focuses on how grief can reshape a person's values, priorities, and understanding of life, where the individuals can develop greater compassion, emotional depth, resilience, and carry about what matters most. Now, whenever it comes to personal and professional development, I believe that the focus of our professional application after our personal development, I believe that we can extend and expand on the 4 areas that Kessler taught us about in this book. These 4 areas, again, is going to be existential or meaning-centered approach, narrative therapy elements, grief counseling and bereavement therapy, and finally cognitive reframing elements from the CBT theory and therapy approach. Now, to start with existential or meaning-centered approach, we can use this professionally after Kessler teaches us that this is very important whenever it comes to trauma, grief, and loss, because when a client wonders who they are now, why this has happened, or how did they move forward, the therapeutic session can focus on empathetically exploring purpose, probe with reflective questions, and help the client identify genuine values, legacy, and future non-judgmental direction. Whenever it comes to the narrative therapy elements, when a client is trapped in identifying labels with painful stories, the therapeutic session can focus on helping them separate themselves from the problem, place blame where it belongs, explore more positive stories they can tell themselves, and even reauthor the overall narrative. Now, whenever it comes to grief counseling and bereavement therapy, when a client is experiencing a loss of any kind, the therapeutic session can focus on normalizing the non-linear grief, exploring the continuing bonds with the deceased. Encourage journaling, rituals, and traditions, along with assessing for possible complicated grief or trauma responses. Now, finally, with cognitive reframing elements or the CBT approach, when a client has increased suffering due to their maladaptive thoughts of the loss they are experiencing, the therapeutic session can focus on identifying their distorted beliefs, gently challenging and replacing with balanced thoughts, and teach coping skills, emotional regulations, grounding techniques, and breathing exercises to help them through this process. I have thoroughly enjoyed myself in this class thus far and feel blessed beyond measure to have selected and was approved for this book to be part of my reflective lab project. And I wish I could have only read and got as much insight as I have gotten out of this book a long time ago. It would have really gotten me through some personal issues that I've had to experience here in the past few weeks. But however, here's my summary of this book. Finding Meaning by David Kessler expands on the grief model developed by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross by introducing meaning as the sixth stage of grief, focusing on how people can move beyond very intensive pain towards purpose and healing. So beneficial there. The book emphasizes that grief is deeply personal, non-linear, and without a set timeline. And it distinguishes natural grief from the additional suffering created by thoughts such as guilt or even self-blame. Drawing on his own experience after the loss of his own son, Kessler explores various forms of loss, including suicide, child loss, addiction, mental illness, and complicated relationships, and offers compassionate guidance for transforming grief into meaning through memory, legacy, and personal growth. Overall, the book provides a framework for shifting from surviving loss to integrating it into a meaningful way so one can continue with their life as productively as they ever were. To finish up with a few thoughtful questions, I came up with a few of them that I enjoyed answering myself and just wanted to share with you all. So the first one is, what overall message do you think Kessler is trying to convey about the relationship between grief, suffering, and healing? I thought that was a very important point, several points actually, that I was able to get out of this book. Number two, Kessler emphasizes that grief is highly individual. How does this challenge common expectations about how people should grieve? And then finally, my third question is, what do you think about how Kessler encourages readers to shift from focusing on pain and loss towards purpose and continued connection? I wanted to take a moment to thank you very much for taking time out of your very busy day to review my Reflection Lab project. I appreciate any constructive feedback that you're able to give me, and I really look forward to reviewing and looking over some of your reflections and what your book had to offer and how it is going to also help us all to be the best clinicians possible. Thank you for your time, your feedback, and I wish you well throughout the rest of this semester. The only reference source that I had that needs a citation is going to be the book itself. It was written by David Kessler in 2019, called Finding Meaning, The Sixth Sense of Grief. It was published in New York by Scribner.